All right, sir. So now onwards, so not only you, my directions are also should be both the sides, right? Fine. So now come for the content what we discussed here. So tomorrow onwards, maintain the same thing. Okay. No. Now we will understand Java perfectly without having any confusion. Fine. And you may ask one question to me, sir, why you have taken this decision today only? It is not the decision on flow on today only. By having some thinking, by having some what I'm telling there with a very good clarity only, I've taken this decision. Some of you might be understand it, some of you are not understanding. Even though if you are not understanding, no problem. Okay, right? It's very clear. Apart from this, I don't want to think any other point here. I don't want to discuss with you. Right? Let's move on to the point here. Yes. What happened for this? It is stopped, no? Are yaar. Now you have to come this side maybe after a few minutes of time. 1 minute. Come. Yeah, it's coming, no problem. Right, sir. Now, in the last two classes, what we understand, in the last two classes, I think so, we have started the content like what there, types of enterprise applications. Here we have discussed there. There are two types of enterprise applications. Can you tell me what are the two types of enterprise applications here we are having if we understand the content? The first one is web applications and the second one is what there distributed applications. First one is what there web applications and the second one is what there distributed applications. Immediately I given a question, one important interview question here I given. What was that question here I given there? What are the differences between web applications and distributed applications? What exactly the differences between web applications and distributed applications? Web application is a client server application where the complete application logic is distributed at the same server machine. But in distributed applications, distributed application is a client server application where the complete application logic is distributed over the multiple missions like a client mission and a server mission. Understand it now? In web applications, client is fixed, that is browser. In web applications, client is fixed, that is what their browser. In the distributed applications, client is not fixed. It is variable. It may be a normal Java program with main method. It may be a simple GUI application like what there applet, or it may be a server-side program like servlet, or maybe a JSP page, or maybe it is a framework application like what Struts application, JSF application, or maybe Spring application. It may be anything. All right, that's the meaning of like what there the client in the case of like what there distributed applications. To prepare web applications, we will use a set of technologies called web technologies. To prepare web applications, we will use a set of technologies called what there web technologies. Like what? What are these web technologies actually? CGI, servlets, JSPs, and so on. To prepare distributed applications, we will use a set of technologies called distributed technologies like socket programming, RMI, CORBA, EJBs, web services, and so on. Next one, the main intention of the web applications is to generate dynamic response with very good look and feel. The main intention of the distributed applications is to establish communication between local machine and remote machine and to access the remote services from the local machine which are available at the remote machine. As I already said to you clearly, what is the meaning of remote machine, remote service? Simple point. If Durgasoft wants to allow online transactions for the courses, online registrations for the courses, we are going to send a registration form to you. There we are going to enter your details. Along with your details, you have to enter your debit card number or credit card number or maybe something else like what there UPI. That option here we are providing. You may select something. When we select something, when we click on that submit button, automatically what happen? The total request will come to Durgasoft. Now immediately what Durgasoft is providing there, Durgasoft is identifying your the payment method. It will understand if it is a debit card or if it is like what the credit card or if it is like what the UPI payment now. On the basis of that respective option, Durgasoft.com is able to get a service from a particular bank. That service will be provided to you directly. There we are going to enter our credit card details or debit card details. If it is UPI ID here we have to enter. Then we have to click on like what there payment for the course like something else, some amount here we have to provide. Oh, it is coming. Okay, payment option here if you provide there, automatically here what is going to be happen there, you may enter the details, you may click on like what there, enter button. When we click on this enter button here, automatically the transaction is going to be done. Who will perform the transaction? Do you think about it that Durgasoft is performing transaction? No, the respective bank application is performing your transaction. Get my point or not? So here Durgasoft is only acting as an interface in between you and the respective bank for the sake of the transaction. Of course, Durgasoft is providing course for you. That's okay. But for the in the point of transaction, it is an interface between you and what the respective bank. The transaction is going on at what their bank here. Got my point or not? Now, in this overall scenario, now tell me who is the service provider and who is service consumer? In this overall process, who is service provider and who is service consumer? Durgasoft is what? Service consumer, not provider. Consumer. Who is service provider? Bank. ICICI Bank is providing what there? A service. ICICI Bank is giving, exposing that service. Durgasoft is using that service there clearly. Yes, sir. All of you are getting it or not? So now here in this overall scenario, Durgasoft mission is what their local mission. ICICI Bank mission is what their remote mission. ICICI Bank application is what their remote service. That remote service is exposed there in the network. Durgasoft is consuming that service. Got my point or not? So this is distributed part. But browser to durgasoft.com is available. That browser to durgasoft.com, we have some conversation that is web application. Durgasoft.com to icicbank.com. This is what their distributed environment. They are exposing service. Durgasoft is consuming that service. Now tell me. So who is client and who is server now in this case here between Durgasoft and ICICI Bank now? Who is client and who is server? ICICI is what their server. Durgasoft is what their client. You understand it clearly. So server is exposing the service. Client is consuming that service. Nice. In Durgasoft, who is performing this entire operation there? A Java program is performing operation. At ICICI Bank also, who is performing the total transaction? A Java program or maybe .NET program or Python program is performing the transaction. It means that in this particular scenario, client is what? Is not a browser. At Durgasoft, client is not a browser. Client is a Java program. It may be a servlet, or it may be a JSP base, or it may be a framework application like struts application, or JSF application, or a Spring application, but it is not a browser. It is not a browser. If it is a browser, then it is what there? A web application. If it is not a browser, if it is a Java application, then it is like what there? A distributed application. That's why I said to you clearly, in a distributed applications, client is not fixed. Client may be a normal Java program, client may be an applet, or client may be what there? A servlet or a JSP base, or it may be a struts application or JSF application or Spring application. Next one is what there? The main intention of the distributed applications is to establish connection with the remote machine from local machine and how to consume the services which are provided by the remote machine to the local machine. Just how to communicate with remote machine, how to consume the services of the remote machine. These are only the two things that what we are having inside our what their distributed environment. Now this one, web applications are executed by both web servers and application servers, but distributed applications are executed by only application servers. Web applications are collection of the web components. Here to execute the web components, we will use web containers like servlets, container, JSP container, and so on. Distributed application is the collection of the distributed components, where to execute the distributed components, we will use the distributed containers like what they are EJB containers. If you want to prepare an enterprise application, We have to use both the web and distributed applications layers as layers. Right, sir. One simple equation here I've given. What is that equation now? Enterprise application is equal to web application plus what their distributed application. Right, sir. Enterprise application is equal to web application plus what their distributed application. Next one is to prepare web applications. We will use the following models. We need to use some design models. What are the various design models here? Model 1 architecture, Model 2 architecture. These two things are available that we have to understand. As the first one here, we have to understand what the Model 1 web application architecture. All of you observe carefully. Immediately, we are not going to use this Model 1 and Model 2 architectures. In web applications only, we are going to use these architectures. But to introduce framework, we need to have awareness on these concepts also. To introduce framework, we need to have awareness on what they're these concepts also. That's why I want to talk about these two architectures clearly. Is it all of you are getting clarity or not? Fine. Let's move on to the point. What is this Model 1 web application architecture? All right. Points was I'm telling you, try to understand it clearly. Model 1 web application architecture is an outdated architecture. It was used at the starting point of the web applications. Model 1 web application architecture is an outdated architecture. It was used at the starting point of the web applications. All right. What is available inside this architecture? I'll show in the form of diagram. No need to worry for it. But first of all, understand the concepts. In Model 1 web application architecture, we will use a JSP page. What is that? A JSP page as a controller, front controller. As a controller in the sense what there? Front controller. As a controller and as a viewport. Both a JSP page is acting as a viewport as well as what there? Controller. And a Java bean component as a model component, as a model. And a Java bean component as what there? A model. Understand it? No, just I want to give a small diagram for it. Try to observe carefully this diagram here. No, everybody understand this diagram here. Right. For example, Model 1 architecture here, if you are understanding here, this is a client. This is a client. Now, this is front controller. Now, this is a Java bean component. This is like what I'm telling to you, Java bean component. Now, here we are having a repository in the sense like what there? Database. Client is okay. Next one is what there? Controller. Model. Database or repository. Okay. Then after this, I want to give some other components here. Now, as a controller, what we are going to provide there? A JSP page. or a set of JSP pages, whatever it may be, either single JSP page or set of JSP pages. All right, now here model component here, what we are able to provide there, a Java bean component is acting as what there, a model component. All right, it's okay. After completion of this content here, what next one here we are able to do there, the flow of execution here I'm telling to you, observe carefully the flow of execution. First of all, what is going to be happen when a client submits request to the web application, where that request will come to controller first. The request will come to what their controller. Who is that controller? Actually, a JSP page. Simple, understand it. JSP page is an extension of the HTML page only, not any other one. But very little bit Java code we are going to write. That's okay. That's a different story. In a JSP, I will discuss more about it. But the point is what there? Not a Java file. Just it is a JSP file where scripting language is available. Understand my point now? Where what is available here? No, scripting language is available. Right. The next one is what there. After that, when client submits request to the controller, then what controller will do there? Immediately controller will identify the Java bean component. It will instantiate Java bean component, and inside the Java bean component business logic is available, so controller will execute that business logic. In this architecture where business logic is available in the Java bean component, that business logic is available as a part of the model. So where it will execute that business logic. By the execution of the business logic, if you have any database interactions or if you have any database operations, then immediately it will interact with the database. It will interact with the database. It will perform the database operations. After performing database operations, it is able to get the required responses from the database, and that responses will be submitted back to what their viewport. Now viewport is what there, the same controller or viewport. Understand it clearly. Now let me check this one. I want to provide now like what there. Then simple here I want to provide controller and view. Both are available here in a single location. In this location they're available. It is not only controller. It is acting as like what there, both a controller and as well as like what there, viewport. Both a controller and a viewport. Both are available here. Okay. Whenever the response is identified, when the response is identified clearly, that response will be given to the viewport now. Then what that viewport is able to do there, that viewport is able to submit that response back to the respective client. Now client is able to display that response to the respective user. That's it. Now this is exactly the flow of execution here we can understand. Is it all of you following or not? Now tell me what happened here. When a client submits a request to the server side application, what is going on at server side application? Controller or viewport is able to take the request from client. Controller or viewport, that means controller will identify in which bean component that business logic is available, and it will create an object for the respective bean component. It will forward that request to the bean component. And the bean component business logic will be executed by having interaction with the database. It's able to perform database operations. Then it able to get results back to the bean component from the database, and it able to send that information to like what their JSP pages. Then JSP page is in the sense what their viewport. Then viewport is able to deliver some response to the respective client. In this overall process here, what I am telling to you, first client is submitting request or not? Yes, request. Next one is what there, the same viewport is generating some response or not? Now this is what their response here that we can identify. Next one is what is this part here? No, and now observe carefully, identifying the bean component and executing business logic. Executing business logic. Identifying bean component and executing business logic. Understand it clearly. Then after that, what next one can know? All right, performing database operations. Performing what their database operations. Part of the business logic, performing database operations. All right, sir. Performing database operations. All right, what next one can know? Returning results from the database. Returning results from database. Then after that, what next one here? No. All right, sending results to the viewport. Sending results to viewport. View component. Sending results to view component. Now view component is generating what their response back to the respective client. That's it. Now this is entire story here. What we are having clearly. All right, sir. Now let me copy this diagram here. So this is the diagram here what we prepared. Now tell me, after completion of this process here, what next one here we are doing there? In this scenario, now point number 3. Now tell me, I'm asking some questions to you. In this overall architecture, who is acting as controller? Now tell me, who is acting as front controller? A page. What is the responsibility of that JSP page now as a controller? Takes the request from clients. After taking requests from clients, then what next one here? No, identifying the bean component where business logic is available, executing. That means accessing that bean component methods, executing business logic. Then up to this part. That means getting requests and controlling the total application is the responsibility of that particular controller or not. That is JSP page or not. Or get my point or not? That means the total manipulation, the total controlling is going on with a controller or not? Controlling the total web application is available with the controller or not? Here controller is what there? A single JSP page or not? That's why this architecture is also be called as page-centric architecture. Yes, sir. What is this architecture? No, page-centric architecture. Page is a central component to control this entire application. That's why it is called as what there? Page-centric architecture. All right. In model 1 web application architecture, a JSP page as a controller, it must control the total web application. It must control the total web applications of flow. Web application and it's a flow of execution. So this architecture is also called, be called as what architecture here? No, right now page centric architecture. This architecture is also be called as what there? Page centric architecture. Everybody understand this point clearly. Next one, all of you observe carefully. What is that next point here we are understanding there? In model 1 architecture, the situation I'm telling there as a controller, a single JSP page. But now understand it, no? In this total model 1 architecture, who is the front controller? Now tell me. The front controller. Control both are same here. What is that front controller actually? JSP page. So JSP page is a front person to take all the requests or not? A JSP page is the first person to take all the requests or not? That's why this architecture is also be called as JSP front architecture. This architecture is also be called as what there? JSP front architecture. Alright, sir. In model 1 architecture, in model 1 web application architecture, a JSP page is acting as a front controller. It must take all the requests from the clients. So this architecture is also called as This architecture is also called, alright, JSP front architecture. This architecture is also be called as what there? JSP front architecture. Understand it clearly. So different names here I given clearly. Okay, fine. At the same time, some drawbacks are also available with this particular architecture. At the same time, some drawbacks are also available with this particular architecture. What are the drawbacks with this particular architecture? What exactly the drawbacks? Understand it, no? I think you might not be aware about this point here, but I'm trying to explain to you, understand it. First basic point I'm telling to you, foundation I'm telling to you, understand it now. JSP page here we are using or not? What exactly the intention of the JSP pages? No, JSP pages intention is like what there? They are mainly for the sake of the presentation. For what purpose JSP was introduced actually? To avoid Java code as much as possible in the web applications. JSP pages main intention is what there? To reduce Java code as much as possible inside the web applications. It is against to the Java code. But JSP pages are mainly for what purpose? Their presentation purpose. That means view purpose only we are going to use. Correct or not? Right. Now come for this. The main drawback with this particular point is what there? In this entire architecture, a JSP page is acting as a controller. To fulfill all the controller's responsibility, single JSP page is not sufficient. Inside the JSP pages, we have to write Java code to fulfill all the requirements of the controller. But writing Java code is against to the rules and regulations of the JSP. So JSP is not the suitable component for what their controller. That's the main drawback with this particular approach. Right, sir. Now let's move on to this particular point here. What is the drawback with this approach? This approach here I'm telling there. In model 1 web application architecture, in model 1 web application architecture, in model 1 web application architecture, we will use a single JDB, a single JSP page as a single JSP page as a controller, as controller. All right, sir. To fulfill all the controller responsibilities, JSP capabilities are not sufficient. So we need to write Java code inside the JSP pages. It is against to the JSP rules and regulations. That's it. Everybody put more concentration. What exactly the point here I'm telling to you? In model 1 web application architecture, we will use a single JSP basis controller to fulfill all the controller's responsibilities. JSP capabilities are not sufficient. So we need to write Java code inside the JSP pages. It is against the JSP rules and regulations. What is that JSP rules and regulations mainly? What exactly the main rule of the JSP actually? Everybody understand it now. The main rule about the JSP is what there? Try to avoid Java code as much as possible inside the web application. But to fulfill all the controllers responsibilities, we are writing Java code inside the JSP page or not. Now this is against to what there? JSP rules and regulations. Because of that reason, this component is not suitable as a controller inside the model 1 architecture. Right, sir. Because of this reason only, model 1 architecture is a unstable architecture, not a stable architecture. It's like what there? Some kind of instability is going on here inside this architecture. Okay, leave this point here. This is one thing. Second one, all of you understand it clearly. Second one, now tell me, sir, controller and view components are what there inside this particular architecture? Controller and both are available like what there? Controller and view both are like what their JSP pages are not. So no clear-cut separation between both the controller and view components. There is no clear separation between view and controller components. All of you get my point or not? There's a tightly coupled design. So it is not suggestible in our web applications. Controller should be separated from the view part. Controller is having its own responsibilities. Viewport is having its own responsibilities. Both should be separated. If we combine both of them, that architecture is not at all good architecture. Their loosely coupled design is not going to be available, where tightly coupled design is going to be available. If you do any modification on any one component there, entire layer is going to be affected. Entire controller and JSP, that means viewport, both are going to be affected. So it is not in loosely coupled design. This is in what there? Tightly coupled design. Right, sir? Now let me take that point also as a drawback here. Now understand this point here. In model 1 web application architecture, in model 1 web application architecture, model 1 web application architecture, we will use a set of JSP pages as controller and viewport. There is no clear cut separation between the controller components and the view components. All right, it represents, there is no clear cut separation between the controller components and view components. It represents tightly coupled design. Tightly coupled design. It is not suggestible in the web applications. It is not suggestible in what their web applications. That's it. These are the various drawbacks which are available with what their model 1 web application architecture. Yes, sir. All of you are getting clarity on this. Model 1 web application architecture here we are getting there. Now try to understand it clearly. Now it is completed clearly. Right, sir. Good. So model 1 architecture concepts here we completed. Now tell me all of you know what is going on in model 1 architecture here. Come on, what is going on in model 1 architecture? Now tell me. First of all, this is what their client. Here, this is what their controller or view. This is what their model. This is the database. What is the flow of execution? Now tell me. First one is what their client will send a request to whom? Controller. What is the job of the controller? Takes that request, identify the business logic with the Java Bean component, which Java Bean component has the business logic, initiating the Java Bean component and sending request to the respective Java Bean component. Where business logic will be executed, part of executing business logic, it may interact with what their databases. When it completes the database operations, it will get the results from the databases and sending back that results to what their viewport. Now viewport, not to the controller part. Now viewport is going to generate some response back to what their respective clients. This is a flow of execution kernel. So in this overall scenario, there are some names, some different names are available for this model 1 architecture. Model 1 architecture is acting as a phase-centric architecture. How can you say that phase-centric architecture, this architecture? Now tell me, what is the reason for it? No. In this particular model 1 web application architecture, a single JSP page is acting as the controller, which controls the total web application. So the centralized component is what their JSP page. No, that's why this architecture is called as what their page-centric architecture. How can you say that this architecture is a JSP front architecture actually? In this web application, model 1 web application architecture, a single JSP page is acting as a front controller. A single JSP page is acting as what their front controller. When it is acting as a front controller, a single JSP page is acting as a front controller. So automatically, what is the meaning of it? No, it is able to take the total request from all the clients and able to submit that request to the controller component, some other component. So a single JSP page is a front person to accept all the requests. That's why it is called as what their page. That means JSP front architecture. All right, sir. Then after that. Next one is what there. After completion of this content here, another point is what there. All right, what are the drawbacks with this particular architecture? Two drawbacks are given. What are the two drawbacks? You know, first one is what there. In model 1 web application architecture, we will use a single JSP page as controller to fulfill all the controller responsibilities. All JSP existing JSP capabilities are not sufficient. Existing JSP capabilities are not sufficient. So we need to write Java code inside the JSP pages. It is against to the JSP rules and regulations. Next one is in model 1 web application architecture. We will use a set of JSP pages as controller and viewport. There is no clear-cut separation between the controller components and view components. It represents tightly coupled design. It is not suggestible in the web applications. That's it. These are overall. These are the points here what we understood clearly. Leave this one. Now this is completed here. After completion of this part here, there we have to go for what there model 2 web application architecture. Model 2 web application architecture. Right, sir. Then what is this model 2 web application architecture? Right, sir. Now all of you understand it clearly. What exactly the model 2 web application architecture? What you are understanding there? Now tell me. Inside this model 2 web application architecture, first of all, I want to take a client. This is client. Okay. Now at server side, we are able to have a controller. This is controller. At the same time, this is like what their viewport. Controller, and this is like what their viewport. After this controller and viewport, there we are going to have what there a model component. Model component. After this model component, here we are able to have what there database. Here we are able to have what their databases. Right. Let me have some names, then first of all, now here we need to provide the client. Next one is what there controller. Next one is what there view. The model. Then after that, what next one here? Database. Right. I want to provide some components clearly. In model 2 web application architecture, as a controller, we are going to use a servlet. We are going to use what there? A servlet. What is this servlet actually? Servlet is a Java class. Servlet is what there? A Java class, purely Java code. Servlet is what there? A Java class, purely Java code. Next one is HTML, comma, JSPs and so on are what their viewport. HTML pages, JSP pages, and all these are what their viewports. A Java Bean components may be, a JDBC program may be, Hibernate may be, and so on. All these are come under like what their model components. Of course, instead of saying that, I want to say this. Let's say, for example, Java Bean, EJB's components, JDBC, and so on. All these are come under like what their model components. Now the database is available. First of all, understand the flow of execution, how it is going to be happen. First, when client submits request to the server side application, who will take that request? No, controller will take that request. Now, control is what there a servlet. Okay, what is the job of the controller? Job of the controller is what there? It will identify the model component where our business logic is available. Then it able to instantiate that model component, and it able to set the data which was submitted by the user. Then it able to execute the business logic. Part of executing business logic, it will connect with the database and it will perform the database operations, and it will get the results from the databases to what their Java Bean component. When results are coming there, the results are given back to what their controller. Then what controller will do after that? Now controller will submit a request to the respective viewport, which viewport is having that actual presentation part with respect to this particular action, activity, then it will forward that request to the viewport. Now viewport has to generate response back toward the respective client. Viewport should take the responsibility of sending a response to the respective client. But while generating response to the respective client, then viewport is able to get some details from what there from the model component. Main operations are what now, try to understand it now. Controller will set the data to the model, and model is able to send the data to what their viewport. Controller can be used to set data to the model. Viewport can be used to get data from the model. Viewport will not set data to the model, and a controller should not get data from what their model. Understand it clearly. All right. But meanwhile, what is the point I'm telling there? In some situations, without performing any operations, viewport is going to generate some notifications kind of information. Notifications here, what I'm telling there, default notifications. Then what I'm going to give an example here about this default notifications here. Understand the point clearly. Say for example, my activity is what there. Initial status of the account is savings, for example, but where we have not performed any action. Even account is also not created. If anybody else wants to create an account, no, the default activity here we want to provide the default activities what there savings account. So such kind of initial informations, not like what there actual after performing operation data will come. That is different. But without performing any action, some notifications are going to be generated. Some statuses values are able to be generated. So to provide the type of statuses to the model component, there our viewport is going to work for what there for the respective component. It may be interact with what their model component, it able to send some data to the model component. So for example, I'm giving some clarity, try to understand it now. In a model component, some beans are available. And that means what are the various things are available? Number one, status of the action. Number two, response delivery status. Two things are available. So what we are going to do there, when the activity is performed here, when flow of execution is coming to the viewport, then viewport wants to get the status value, activity status from the model component. Okay, activity status is what their success that it is getting now. Then response delivery status must also be maintained by the model part or not. But how it is able to send that response delivery status to the model part now? Say for example, just it is ready to send response to the respective client. Just before sending response to the client, it has to give a notification to the model. Now I'm ready to send response to the respective client. Almost when I'm ready, I'm dispatching that response to the client. Then immediately we have to make the status is what they're delivered. The status of that response delivery is what they're delivered. That we want to maintain inside the model component. So if it is the case now, viewport must send that delivered response to the respective model or not. Viewport must send that delivered response to the model or not. So for that purpose, communication must be existed in between viewport to model component. Not only for the sake of getting data from model to view, viewport is also be sending some kind of notifications to what their model component. This is exactly the requirement of providing this arrow here directly. Yes, sir. All of you get my point or not? All right, sir. Good. Now try to understand it clearly. Each client is getting on individual JSP base or different clients now. Accessing a single JSP base as a controller or viewport. No. It's not the case here. I think then this is for the sake of the previous content we are explaining. It's okay, leave it now. Now in this overall scenario here, I'm telling there, what is the point I'm telling now? What exactly the data which is submitted by client to the server side application, that front controller will take that request first. Front controller will send that data to the model component. Then viewport will get the data from model component. Viewport will not set that user data to the model. Viewport will get the data from the model component. Okay. Then viewport is responsible to give some notification, some status related information to the like what their model component. That's why it will send some data to the model component. That is only notifications kind of information. And finally, viewport is sending some response back to what their respective clients. Get my point or not? So this is the total flow of execution what we are having inside like what there this model 2 web application architecture. Now here we are providing some requests here. This is like what the request. Now here we are providing what there a response. Now understand this response here. This is response here. Overall, all the contents are very clear. Now this is about what there model 2 web application architecture. All of you are getting it or not? Right, sir. Now So let me provide one more thing. Just give a minute of time. Well, 1 minute. Right, sir. Now, this entire thing is what there server side application. This entire part is what there server side application. Okay, fine. First of all, let me prepare this diagram. Then after that, I want to give points by point. No. Now tell me, what is that point number one? Here we are understanding there in model one web application architecture. In model two web application architecture, we will use a servlet as a controller. We will use a servlet as what there a controller. So this architecture is called servlet centric architecture. Am I right? In model 2 web application architecture, we will use a servlet as a controller. So this architecture is called servlet centric architecture. Next one is watch. In model 2 web application architecture, we will use a servlet as a front controller. So this architecture is also called servlet front architecture. This architecture is also be called as what there servlet front architecture. Next one. In model 2 web application architecture, we will use a servlet as controller comma a set of HTML comma JSP pages as what their view part and a Java bean comma EJB component or hibernate and so on as what there as a model components. They are the normal components here I'm giving there. Understand that another point here. In this architecture, one more point. In model 2 web application architecture, in model 2 web applications architecture, we will use, all of you understand it clearly, in model 2 web application architecture, we will provide controller layer and the view layer, controller layer and view layer separately. Am I right or not? We will provide controller layer and view layer separately. It represents loosely coupled design, loose coupled design or loosely coupled design. It will represent what there loose coupled design or loosely coupled design. It is suggestible for the web applications. It is suggestible for what there for the web applications. Understand the point? Almost all the drawbacks of this model 1 architecture are rectified in model 2 architecture or not? No response, guys. Okay, fine. This is one point. In model 2 web application architecture, we will provide controller and view layer separately. It represents loosely coupled design. It is suggestible for the web applications. All right, which architecture is suggestible for the web applications? No, model 1 architecture or model 2 architecture? Model 2 web application architecture is suggestible for what their web applications. Then after that, here are given the total flow of executions that we can identify. Through that, we are able to understand how this model 2 architecture is going to be happen. All of you are getting it or not? All right, one more point here I'm telling to you, observe carefully. Model 2 web application So architecture is following MVC design pattern. Is following MVC design pattern internally. Model 2 web application architecture is following what design pattern internally? MVC design pattern internally. Clear to all of you? All right. After this, then what next one here? I'm telling there. The next one is what there? After completion of this. Model 2 web application architecture is also be called as MVC architecture. Model 2 web application design architecture is also be called as what there? MVC architecture. Right? Listen carefully. So it is also called MVC architecture. MVC architecture. MVC architecture. Next one is after this. Understand the point clearly. Some frameworks like struts, maybe JSF and Spring Web MVC are designed on the top of the Model 2 architecture. So these web frameworks are called MVC based frameworks. These frameworks are called as what? They're MVC based frameworks. Got it or not? Now tell me, what are the various MVC based frameworks which are available outside now? Struts framework, JSF framework, then what next one can know? Spring Web MVC. These are all like what? They're MVC based frameworks. Right, sir. Now it is completed. After completion of this, next one is MVC rules and regulations. MVC rules and regulations. MVC architecture rules and regulations. If you want to use MVC based, if you want to prepare MVC based application, what exactly the rules and regulations here we have to follow to prepare these MVC based applications. Now understand it clearly, everybody. Right, the diagram for this MVC architecture is the same diagram. No need to have any separate diagram. By observing this diagram only, we are going to give some information to you know. Now try to understand the points here. First point is like what there, very first point. In MVC based web applications, we must use a servlet as controller and a JSP page and a set of JSP pages as the viewport. We must not interchange the controller and view components. Controller is having its own responsibilities and view components are having its own responsibilities. So we should not interchange these controller and view components. We must not use a JSP page as a controller. We must not use a servlet as a viewport. So servlet must be controller and a set of JSP pages must be what their viewport. We must not interchange these two. Is it? All of you are getting it or not? This is point number one. Here what we are getting. Leave this one. Next one is after that. Observe this diagram here. If you understand flow of execution one time, client will send request to the controller. That means here controller main responsibility is what they're getting every request from the control only. That means every request from clients must be reached to control only. We should not send direct request to what their viewport. We must not send request to viewport directly. We must send our request to what their controller. From that control onward, that flow of execution will be started. So every request must be submitted to what their controller only, not to any other component. Got it or not? Right, sir. Now observe carefully. In MVC based web applications, controller must receive all the requests from the clients. Controller must receive all the requests from what there from clients. Controller component must receive, the controller component must receive all the requests from the clients. This is mandatory. All right, so all the requests from the clients. And the view components, listen carefully, view component must send a response to the client, and a view component must send response to the client. No other component is responsible for it. Only view component is able to submit response to the respective client. Controller is receiving request, view is going to submit response to the respective client. But unfortunately, what happened there? Frameworks are third-party products, but these rules and regulations are provided by whom? Provided by the MVC as a standardization. But frameworks are third-party products. All frameworks vendors are trying to implement these rules and regulations effectively, 100%. But as per their flexibility, one or two frameworks may violate one or two rules and regulations of this MVC. 100% they may not follow the MVC rules and regulations. As per their flexibility, they may violate one or two number of rules of this MVC also. The best example I'm telling there. One point I said to you, the second point. What is the second point now? So now tell me, what is the second point I've given here in this overall point here? In this overall discussion, what is the second point here I've given there? In MVC based web applications, the controller component must receive all the requests from the clients. That means every client must send their request to whom? To the control only. But in the case of Struts framework, what is going to be happen? The very first request must be submitted to the welcome page. Welcome page is an HTML page or maybe JSP page. Then it is a part of what their view part. That means direct first request is coming to the view part or not. It is a violation of the MVC rules and regulations. But Struts framework was designed in this way only. Struts framework was designed on the basis of that particular point only. So what is the meaning of it? No, Struts framework is following almost all the rules and regulations of the MVC, but except one or two rules and regulations. That one or two is what there? The same content. Leave this one. Spring Web MVC is available. Every response must be submitted to what there? To the client by the view part only. Am I right or not? Response must be generated by the view part only. But in the case of Spring MVC, who is submitting that response to the respective client? No, front-end control is taking response from view part. Front-end control is sending that response to the respective client. Again, it is what there? Violation of the rules and regulation. But as per the Spring framework advantages, as per the Spring framework convenience, as per the developers convenience, they prepared Spring framework in this way. Sir, all of you are following or not? So because of that reason, what is the point I'm telling there? MVC has a set of rules and regulations, but there is no guarantee whether all the frameworks vendors are following these rules and regulations as it is. Maybe some of the rules and regulations they may violate, some of the rules and regulations they're able to follow. Sir, are you getting it or not? Okay, fine. Leave this point here. In MVC based web applications, the controller component must receive all the requests from the clients, and the view component must send responses to the respective clients. That's okay, fine. Next, observe carefully. Controller must interact with the model component to set users data, to set users data, to set users data. 1 minute. Controller must interact with the model component to set users data, not to get the users data. Right, so this is one thing. Controller component, controller must, the controller component must interact with the model component to set users data, not to get users data. That's one point here. Next one is, and view components must interact with the model component to get the users data, in order to render the response. Render the response in the sense submitting response, or maybe preparing some other scripting also along with that response to provide look and feel for the response. Some kind of integrations we are going to provide. That integrations and submitting the response to the respective client, that we are going to say that what there? Render the response. While render the response, if it required to get some details from the model, then it will interact with the model component. At the same time, it is able to provide some notifications kind of content with the model component. Understand it clearly? Right, sir. Next one more point here. Observe carefully. Fourth point, the controller components, the controller and the view components must not interact with the databases directly. They must interact with the databases through the model components only. They must interact with the databases through what their model components only. They will not interact with the databases directly. All right. Next one is after that another point here. All of you observe carefully. Simple point no. In MVC based web applications, everybody understand it clearly. In MVC based web applications, only one controller must be provided. Only one front controller must be provided. Only one front controller must be provided. So it must be a singleton. So it must be what there singleton. But we can provide any number of. But we can provide any number of model components and view components. Then, but we can provide any number of model components and view components as per the requirement. Controller should be only one. But any number of JSP based as viewport we can provide. Any number of Java Bean components as a model components we can provide. That doesn't matter. But controller must be only one controller here we have to provide. Because of that reason, it must be what there a front controller. That means it must be what there a singleton component. So only one object is creating for a particular class in the sense which class it is no is a singleton class or not. Definitely it is what there a singleton class no. Next one more point. All of you observe carefully. In a JSP, that means in MVC based applications, we can provide any number of JSP pages. We don't have any problem. But all the JSP pages must be Java code less JSP pages. What's the meaning of Java code less JSP pages? No, without Java code, we have to prepare the JSP pages. Without the Java code, we have to prepare what their JSP pages. Understand it clearly? In MVC based web applications, we will use multiple JSP pages as a viewport. But all the JSP pages must be Java codeless. All the JSP pages must be what there? Java codeless. Right, sir. Next one is after that. Another point, last point here we have to understand. In MVC based web applications, we will use multiple JSP pages as a viewport, but we must not provide page to page communication. But we must not provide page to page communication. Okay, where we must provide page controller page communication. What communication here we have to provide there? Page controller page communication, but not page to page communication. Say for example, I think all of you are having idea on GUI part. For example, I prepared an HTML file. Inside this HTML there is an hyperlink. So already we are at one page. If I click on hyperlink, then what next one here apart from this? If I click on hyperlink, automatically the flow will come to what there? Another page. This is what their page to page communication directly. But in MVC it is not suggestible. The page to page communication is not suggestible in MVC. But what is suggestible in MVC here? No. If I click on one link there, first the request must go to the controller. Controller has to show the direction, target page to navigate. then directly as per the target page, we have to send the flow of execution to the controller. That means to the JSP page now, some other page here. So here what is going to be happen? Page controller page navigation, but not page to page navigation. See, directly if we provide the navigation between two pages, almost all we are neglecting controller only. I get my point or not? But we must give importance to what their controller, So because of that reason, what is the point here I'm telling to you? Just in MVC based web applications, we will use multiple JSP pages as viewport, but we must not provide page-to-page communication, where we must provide what their page controller page communication. Is that clear? All of you are getting clarity on these points now? What exactly the points I have given there? These are all overall MVC rules and regulations here we are providing. Right, sir. That's okay, fine. Now understand it clearly. Yeah, control. See, in this architecture, people are having some question there. Why we are providing an arrow from servlet to viewport, controller to viewport? Yes, exactly. Who is executing our business logic here? No model component. There the response is given to what their controller. Then controller has to give that response to what their viewport. Then viewport has to display that response to the respective client. So request must be forwarded from controller to the viewport or not. That's why this arrow is provided. Understand it clearly. Next one is what is the arrow between controller and viewport for? Yeah, controller to viewport, just forwarding request to do the viewport. JSP page in order to generate response to the respective client. That's the intention of what this particular arrow. Okay, right, sir. Now understand it clearly. This is exactly the meaning of like what there. Overall MVC rules and regulations here we understood clearly. Has sir got it or not? Now finally I want to go for a question. Everybody must give answer for this particular question. Observe carefully. What is my question here in this case now? To prepare web applications, we have already web technologies. We have already web technologies like servlet, JSPs and so on, comma. Then what next one here? Apart from this, IDEs like Eclipse, IntelliJ and so on, comma. Servers like Tomcat, WebLogic and so on, comma. Model architectures like model 1 architecture, comma, model 2 architecture and so on and so on and so on. Still, what is the requirement of the frameworks? I think you understood my question here. To prepare web applications, these many alternatives are available. These many things are existed here. These many things in the sense like what there. Now tell me. To prepare web applications, already we have what there. Already we have what there. Technologies are available. Web technologies, servlets and JSPs. IDs are available. Servers are available. Next one is what there. Modeled architectures are available. These many things are already existed. We already have these many things. But still, what is the requirement to go for frameworks? What is the need of these frameworks? The Spring is a framework. But before understanding that Spring framework, I'm asking this question to you. What is the need of this Spring framework? What is the requirement to go for this Spring framework? This is the question here what we are having. Yes, sir. We must give answer for this question. Now try to understand it clearly. What is the answer for this question here now? Already we have technologies, already we have IDEs, already we have servers, already we have MVC architecture or modeled architectures, but still what is the requirement to go for frameworks? What is the need of these frameworks? That we will understand tomorrow. That we are going to understand the content tomorrow. So tomorrow's class, very, very important. With some examples, I'm going to introduce that framework. So try to follow that. Remember it, without understanding the requirement of the frameworks, understanding Spring framework is a time waste process. Spring is a framework. Without knowing the need of frameworks, understanding Spring framework is a time waste process. So try to attend the class on tomorrow. Without failure, you must attend the class on tomorrow, right? Now take few minutes break and come back. I'll start JDBC class now. Thank you.